the sabab an-nuzul of a verse. For example, Al-Bukhari reports that once the Prophet asked Jibreel, "Why do you not visit us more often?" Allah then revealed Surah 19 verse 64. "And we the angels do not descend except by the command of your Lord." The rulings from these verses. If the sabab an-nuzul of a verse is known, should the verse only apply to the particular case for which it was revealed, or should it be extended to all cases that the wording implies? In other words, is the ruling restricted to the specific circumstances in which it was revealed, or is it applied according to the generality of the wording of the verse? And let me give you the answer. To quote an example, the oft-quoted verse in Surah 59 verse 7. "And whatever the messenger gives you, take it, and whatever he forbids you, abstain from it." Now this verse was revealed concerning the spoils of war, those things that you get after a war that are left in the war field, property, swords, valuables. Is this verse then understood to apply only to the spoils of war? Or does it apply to everything the Prophet commanded or forbade, since the wording of the verse implies this? The majority of scholars hold the view that the rulings from such verses are applied to every case that the wording of the verse covers. In other words, the ruling is not restricted to the sabab an-nuzul, but rather to every case that comes under the wording of the verse. In fact, one of the popular legal maxims in fiqh, in jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence, is the consideration for a ruling comes from the generality of the wording and not the specificity of its circumstance of revelation. For example, the verse of the an. Remember what that one was about, ladies? Who remembers? Slander. MashaAllah. Despite the fact that these verses were revealed for particular persons, the Prophet ﷺ even said Allah has revealed verses concerning you and your spouse to whom are applied to every husband who accuses his wife of adultery without bringing any witnesses. So even though it was a specific aspect, it is for all men that you have to obey that. This is because it is not possible to restrict the ruling to the circumstances of its revelation. For the Qur'an was revealed as a guidance for all the nations until the day of judgment, and not just for the companions. However, there are a very small number of verses that are specifically meant to apply only for the sabab an-nuzul for which they were revealed. These verses cannot apply to the Muslims in general. When this is the case, an inspection into the asbab an-nuzul enables the researcher to know whether these verses should be applied in general or whether they are an exception to the rule. For example, the verse of the an were revealed concerning a certain circumstance. That is, that a husband accuses his wife of adultery without bringing forth the necessary 4 witnesses. It makes sense to apply this ruling to every similar case. However, the verse that came down to clear Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, of the false charges that were impugned on her are obviously meant only for her and not for Muslims in general. Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
The practice of taking the ruling from the generality of the verse and not from the specificity of the sabab was the one practice by the companions and those who followed them, and by the majority of the jurists. The other opinion, that of applying the verse only to its sabab an-nuzul, was held by a small group of jurists and is definitely the rejected view. According to these jurists, in order to extend the ruling of the verse beyond the sabab an-nuzul analogy, which is called qiyas, must be resorted to, as the verse cannot be taken to apply to a latter case. Therefore, going back to the initial example of the verse, and whatever the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives you, take it. Even though the verses were revealed with regards to the spoils of war, since the wording of the verse implies every command and prohibition from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this verse is applied on the generality of the wording. The fact is also proven by the companions who used this verse as evidence for obeying the Prophet in commands and prohibitions not related to the spoils of war. This verse is often used when people ask a question that is not specifically answered in the Qur'an. Anybody ever been given this answer before, this verse? Okay, I was. Yes. So they'll say, look, take what the Prophet gave you and don't go where he said don't go. Because people will come up with things sometimes that doesn't say straight out, do not do this. So then they want an answer, they can't find one. So it means it's part of is it mandub, brother, the neutral? Not makruh, not haram. What's the one that's neutral? It's not halal, haram. Mubah.
Mubah.
Mubah? Makruh. No, makruh
No, makruh is right
tasteful.
before haram.
Mustahab. Mustahab. I think mustahab is the word I'm looking for. But there is an Arabic word that means that it's not mustahab. I don't think it either. I think you're right. I'm sorry. Forgive me. The word is escaping me. But it's when it's not makruh and it's not. What's the one that's mandub? Plain mandub. Anyway, forgive me. It's escaping my mind. There's a category in there when we look at halal, haram, makruh, mandub, all of that.
Mustahab.
Mustahab, that means neutral, right?
Liked.
Mustahab means liked, so it's
no,
not
it's not mustahab. This is neutral. I mean, it's not disliked, it's not liked. It's in the middle. And I can't think of the word. May Allah forgive me and bring it to me.
English is good enough.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, so, for example, a woman came to Abdullah ibn Masud and said, I have heard that you curse those ladies who tattoo themselves or others, and those ladies who get their facial hair, that's supposed to be hair. I was doing these last slides at 5 this morning, not their hair removed. Their hair removed. And those ladies who created gaps between their teeth to look more beautiful. What is this about, folks?
Changing the.
It's about vanity. It's about vanity, okay? All right. Thereby changing the creation of Allah. He answered, and why should I not curse them when the Prophet ﷺ has cursed them, and they are cursed by Allah's book? She replied, I have read the whole Qur'an from cover to cover, and yet did not find this curse. He answered, indeed, had you really read it, you would have found it. Did you not read the statement of Allah in Surah 59, verse 7? And whatever the messenger commands you, take it. And whatever he prohibits you from, abstain from it. You see how this verse is used in two contexts? Everybody got it? How many people see how it was used in the two different contexts?
Yes.
Okay? Very good. Okay, alhamdulillah. Anybody doesn't see it? Alright, alhamdulillah. You don't get it? Okay, let me go back. Somebody help him. Somebody tell him the two contexts that I gave.
I can say.
Please do, sister.
What we're trying to learn here is that when the verse is general, even though we know the sabab nuzul of the verse for one specific incident, because of the wording of the verse being general, it can be applied to other situations. So in this case, the verse talks about booty, spoils of war. However, because it's general in the verse, we understand why the verse was revealed, but because the verse is general, It's used for other circumstances. If the Prophet said it, if it's in the hadith, then it is to be applied.
MashaAllah. That's my teacher's assistant right there.
You go, girl.
You got the gold star and bonus points. Yeah, okay. So, in this case, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud used the verse according to the generality of its meaning, that the Quran commands the Muslims to obey the Prophet ﷺ in all matters, and did not limit it to its sabab and nuzul.
I think it's mubah.
I think it might be mubah as well. Mubah.
Is it, does that have to do with these types of things?
Oh, well, the one that had to do with vanity is the one that said, don't tattoo yourself to make yourself more beautiful, and don't fill the gaps in your teeth.
Don't create the gaps.
Hold on, let me go back. Hold on 1 second. Let me go back. Wait a minute. So a woman came. Whoa. A woman came to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and said, I have heard that you curse those ladies who tattoo themselves or others, and those ladies who get their facial hair removed, and those ladies who create gaps between their teeth. So then the Quran came along and said, what is allowed, and what the Prophet has prohibited is prohibited. So if the Prophet said something is prohibited in ahadith, then it's prohibited. Does that make sense? So that's where you get some of your prohibitions. All of the prohibitions are not mentioned specifically in the Quran. Like what the woman said, I read the Quran from cover to cover, and I didn't see the word tattoo. But he said if you had read it, and then he mentioned this ahadith. Yes?
That's the verse that they use to talk about no plucking of the eyebrows.
Yeah, and this verse is taken by some extremists quite far.
How do you get
You?
that?
So I don't see a hadith in here. I see somebody else's statement. But there's no attribution to Muhammad in there.
No, but there is a hadith.
There is a hadith.
Yeah.
A
Yes.
separate hadith beyond it.
There is a hadith. Right. There is a hadith about it. I didn't put the hadith in the slide, but there is hadith about that effect. Okay. All right. Shall I move on?
Yes. To pray with it?
I wanted to try to finish this. Yes.
So I'm just trying to understand, so if you have a really ugly, like for women, if she has a unibrow or if she has mustache, or she has, whatever, you're not allowed to, you're supposed to walk around like that? I think that would be very...
No,
Hold on. Let the teacher answer the question.
Lord have mercy.
If it is causing you distress, because they say your child is teased at school or something, then obviously you would want to do something proactive. Anyway, we want to do that. But the issue is if it's a matter of simply vanity, it's a matter of I'm trying to, put my beauty, my outward beauty out there instead of my inward intelligence and my iman. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's yes, I don't want, it's like, if you talk about the creation of the law, for example, and somebody asked me this question, and I actually discussed it with a scholar. After a woman has breastfed for 8 years, things don't look like they did when they were a teenager. So somebody came and said, do I have permission to have things tacked up? And I said, well, is it a problem for you? And they said, oh, yes, it is. And then they proceeded to explain the problem. And after they explained the problem, I thought, well, if I was a woman, I would definitely want to fix that. That sounds sort of complicated. So you see, it's all about your intention, folks. Allah knows your heart. If stuff's falling all out of your clothing and stuff because it's not working, or you got to put a clothespin, you got to use a rubber band. Allah is not unreasonable, and you just have to know your heart, So we have to stop here. The good news, maybe it's good, is that we're on slide 212. We have to go to slide 234, and we will have finished Asbab an-Nuzul.
Slide
And so we're on 212. So we will have finished Asbab an-Nuzul, and then we're going to go to the compilation of the Quran. Yes, Sister Nuran.
I want to say that we're going to miss Dr. Sadia and Dr. Nasser. They'll be gone for 1 month.
Yes, Dr. Nasser and Dr. Sai are going to be on vacation for 1 month. We're going to be crying every Sunday.
That is not allowed.
Where are you guys going?
After you guys take the Christmas break,
So,
for very selfish reasons.
but you can go back and see it online. But we want you to pray for us because the prayer of the traveler is exalted. And so we want you to be praying for us as you're traveling.
Times 3. So
I love you. I love you all for the sake of Allah. I hope everybody's hearing me because I hear other people talking. But I love you all for the sake of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.